Welcome, everybody, to the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division webinar event entitled Corporate America's Responsibility and Response to Civil Discord. I'm Sheila Spence, and I sit on our planning committee. I'd like to give a very special shout out to our sponsors, including the YLD Diversity and Inclusion Team and the Business Law Committee for putting this all together. This session will cover how and why corporations are getting involved in social change and how they are approaching social responsibility and making efforts to contribute to social justice initiatives. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator, Tommy Preston Jr. Tommy is the Director of National Strategy and Government Operations at the Boeing Company, where he focuses on regulatory, public policy, and external engagement for the company. Tommy also serves on Boeing's Racial Equity Task Force. Before Boeing, he was in private practice where he represented companies and organizations, including Boeing, on economic development, public policy, and regulatory matters. Tommy served as the national chair of the ABA Young Lawyers Division from 2018 to 2019 and currently represents the YLD on the ABA nominating committee. I will now pass it over to Tommy to introduce the speakers for this afternoon. At the end of the session, you'll have the opportunity to ask our guests questions, but please feel free to write them in the Q&A feature. Tommy and panelists, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's program, and thank you, Sheila, for that very kind introduction. I'll start by saying we're roughly 2 months until the end of what has been one of the most tumultuous times or years in modern history. We've had a global pandemic, economic recession, natural disasters, and civil and racial unrest here in the United States. From murders of innocent and unarmed Black Americans to police brutality to protests to complete anarchy on the streets of major cities and even small town America, we've seen a country that is reminiscent of the 50s and 60s or Jim Crow area and not the 21st century. In the midst of tragedy and chaos that awakened the nation's conscious to racial inequalities in our country, we saw average Americans stand up and say enough is enough. And we also saw some of our nation's largest corporations make a commitment to pursuing a more inclusive and just country. Really excited about this program today. We have a group of remarkable corporate leaders who are helping their companies in the area of corporate social responsibility, particularly as it pertains to racial inequalities and social justice. Someone who is helping lead my company in our efforts in racial equity. I know how critical the last several months have been for each of our panelists today, and grateful for the time that you've given us this afternoon. So without further ado, I'll jump in and introduce our panelists, and we'll get started with some questions and having a great dialogue today. I'm going in alphabetical order. First, we have Nick Austin. Nick is the Senior Counsel and Vice President in the Corporate Strategic Transactions Group, leading M&A and venture capital transactions at Wells Fargo. Nick worked as mergers and acquisitions and venture capital counsel at Caterpillar Incorporation before coming into Wells Fargo. And prior to that, he was an associate at the Georgetown offices of Foley and Lardner. Nick recently chaired the Young Lawyers Division of the National Bar Association. He earned his Juris Doctorate at Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C., and a proud alum of Morehouse College. Nick, welcome to the group. Next, we have with us Cristina Hernandez. Cristina is the Director of Inclusion Strategy, supporting Netflix's global talent and HR team, the legal team, and other entities at Netflix, and reports directly to Renee Myers, the Vice President of Inclusion Strategy at Netflix and a great friend of the ABA. Cristina has over 20 years of experience as an equity champion and business leader. In a prior professional life, Cristina was a lawyer specializing in securities litigation. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School, where she was the founding editor of the Harvard Latino Law Review and a graduate of Harvard College. I'll also highlight the fact that she is the recipient of the Hispanic National Bar Association's Latina Lawyer of the Year in 2009. So Cristina, we welcome you as well. Next, we have Russell Shaffer. Russell is the Director of Brand Strategy, Communications, Outreach, and Benchmarking in the Office of Global Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion at Walmart, and reports directly to the Chief Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer. He and his team have responsibility for visual and messaging strategy, executive and enterprise communication, and strategic relationships related to the company's global culture, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. In a previous role as Senior Manager of Constituent Relations, Russell managed Walmart's corporate strategy and stakeholder outreach for people with disabilities and aging constituencies. Russell is an honors graduate of Malone University in Canton, Ohio, and holds a dual degree in business administration and communication arts. And last but not least, Brandon Thompson. Brandon is the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at NASCAR, where he leads NASCAR's strategy for diversity and inclusion, as well as programs and initiatives designed to champion and enhance diversity across the NASCAR industry. Prior to this appointment in June of this year, Brandon served as Managing Director of the NASCAR Touring Series, and Brandon's career in motorsports began in 2003 as an intern at Nashville Super Speedway, a role he applied for through NASCAR's diversity internship program. And I will point out that when he assumed this vice president role back in June, he became the first diversity intern graduate to join NASCAR's executive ranks as an officer. So congratulations to you on that distinction, Brandon. And Brandon is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University and holds a degree in business administration and marketing. So as you can tell, we have 4 outstanding panelists today who are not only just involved in diversity, inclusion, racial equity work in their companies, but helping to set the strategy and tone for the work that's being done all across the country. So, we'll go ahead and start with our first question. And, really, I think to get things started, I think let's just talk about, why your company got involved in social change and what your company is doing in reference to supporting racial equity in the community. And I'll start with you, Brandon. So, anyone who's been watching the news over the past several months will know that NASCAR has been very public or has had some very public events this year, ranging from banning Confederate flags at races to rallying behind one of his black racers, Bubba Wallace, who experienced public racism at different points this year. So, Brandon, if you want to kick us off, tell us, why you guys got involved in social change and what your company is doing in reference to supporting racial equity in the community.
Thanks, Tommy. First, I just want to thank you and everybody else, the rest of the panelists, for having us on today. Excited about the conversation and hearing from all these great folks that I share the panel with. But I think, simply put, and I'm going to grossly generalize this, but it's the right thing to do, right? And I think that we start there and move up. And I think for us, diversity and inclusion are literally part of our core values at NASCAR, and making that public and also making the conversations that we've been having internally for some time now public was really important to us. Obviously, with the reckoning that was going on in the country, we wanted to make sure that we came out and stood up against what we thought was right, and stood up against what was wrong and in favor of what was right. But I think for us, the main thing that we wanted to focus on again was we've had these conversations for some time. I know a lot of people feel like, and listen, justifiably so, we don't have our heads buried in the sand as to the negative connotation sometimes that comes along with NASCAR. But the truth of the matter is that we've had programs like the diversity internship program for the better part of 20 years now. Even the Drive for Diversity crew member development, as well as the driver development program, have been around for some time. So for us, it was just a matter of making those conversations that have really been going on inside of our walls and inside the industry for some time, just making those public and making our stance public.
Yeah, Brandon, just to touch on that just a little bit more, I had a second question for you, and you sort of hit the nail right on the head. When people think of NASCAR, folks don't always think of it being a diverse sport. But you are a personal testament to the fact that NASCAR it has a commitment to diversity with a number of programs that have been around a long time. Can you talk about, like, personally, what was your interest in NASCAR that led you to apply for the diversity program, and how that ultimately helped you to get to where you are today?
Tommy, I needed to graduate. Being quite honest with you. So I stayed on campus at Clark Atlanta University in the summer in between my freshman and sophomore year, and just really wanted to go back home, back to Nashville, Tennessee, to complete my internship that was required for course credit. And came across this internship program packet, candidly, really not knowing what it was. I just saw that it was in Nashville, and then sort of began to look into it more. And obviously coming to find out that it was with and through NASCAR, and it was a great experience. But that was really what drove me to it. I didn't have a very deep background in NASCAR at all. It's actually somewhat ironic because my uncles tell me about how they would kind of go to the Fairground Speedway in Nashville, which is actually the longest running track on the NASCAR circuit. That is, the longest continuous running paved track here in the country. But they would tell me stories about how they would sneak under the fences after the races started and those types of things. And I never got those stories until after I got my internship. And so I guess you could say it was a sort of a weird twist of fate or irony, but that was my sole motivation. But I quickly fell in love, not only with the sport itself, but with the people and the personalities in and around that. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Brandon. Russell, let's jump over to you for a moment. It's hard to think of a company who's done more in the diversity space for a number of years than Walmart. And I know you have a very dynamic chief diversity officer and Ben Saba Hassan, who really is a global leader in this space. So can you talk a little bit about what Walmart has been doing over the years in the D&I space, and specifically thinking about the period that we've been in over the last several months, what you all have done really around racial equity in the community?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tommy, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. This is a really important conversation. And I appreciate, the kind words about our progress to date at Walmart. I think for us, it really all centers around living out our values and our purpose. So, when you think about Walmart, I would imagine, most everybody on this call, if you've not been inside of a Walmart, chances are at least you've driven past one. You've seen a Walmart before. We are within 10 miles of 90% of the U.S. population. So, when you think about being a fixture in the community, there's more to that than just being a store where you come to buy your milk and bread and your clothes and your consumables and things like that. We really want to be a store of the community. That means having a workforce that's reflective of that community, and selling an assortment that is aligned to the specific needs and wants of a particular community. And that means having a dynamic workforce that's diverse, obviously, but also one that's inclusive. For us, we believe that if you want to innovate, and in the modern business environment where there's so much disruption going on, particularly in retail, if you want to innovate, you've got to differentiate. In order to differentiate, you need that workforce that comes with unique identities, styles, abilities, experiences, and perspectives. The only way in which you're able to tap into that diversity and that difference and maximize the ROI that can come from it is when you create an inclusive environment. And so for us, that really ties back to the values that our founder, Sam Walton, instilled in the company: service to the customer, respect for the individual, and a purpose to save people money so that they can live better. And when we say those terms, there's no implied qualifiers there. We don't mean respect for some people or service to some customers and not others. And when we say saving people money so they can live better, we truly mean all people. I think this current climate, Tommy, has really helped us, come into focus and understand that, this notion of living better. When you talk about living better in America, for people of color, for Black and brown individuals, living better can simply mean not fearing for your life or fearing for the lives of those that you love. And so when you talk about, carrying that into work each day, if you're an associate, or carrying that into the aisles of our stores, whether it's about your own psychological and physical safety or that of the people that you love, that impacts the way in which you go about your day. And so if we can put some policies and practices in place as an employer, as a retailer, to help shift the paradigm a little bit as it comes to racial equity, not only is that consistent with our values and our purpose, but it helps create a better experience at work for our employees, our associates, so they can be more productive and more highly engaged, in return deliver a better experience to our customers that we're trying each day to serve as best as we can.
Yeah, thank you, Russell, for that. Nick, going over to you for just a moment, and I would be remiss if I didn't, acknowledge how much we appreciate in the ABA-YLD, the partnership we've had with you over the last several years, and just honored to know you and to call you a friend, and appreciate your leadership not only in the ABA but in the NBA and beyond as well. Let me just ask you, thinking about Wells Fargo, you guys have made a lot of recent announcements in the racial equity space, whether it's commitment to HBCUs and recruiting out of HBCUs, and investing over $1 billion in, closing the racial wealth gap, or even housing issues and supporting Black-owned businesses and suppliers. Can you talk a little bit about those things? And certainly, from the wealth standpoint, I think you guys have certainly, found a niche area to provide support for diverse communities, and would love for you to not only share what you're doing, but just dive in a little bit deeper into why those efforts really matter in our country right now.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate the kind words, Tommy. I've admired your leadership and what you've done with the ABA and ABA-YLD as well. And we need more people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work to make this country the place that we want to see. And so thank you for all the work and leadership that you've done. But people forget, at Wells Fargo, you are our customers. Our customers are straight. Our customers are lesbian. Our customers are Latino. They're Black. They're white. They're tall. They're short. They're at different ends of the socioeconomic spectrum. And, we have a vested interest in making sure that, we're providing the best services and the best quality of life for our customers when they work with us, whether they're looking to buy their first home, whether they're looking to finance their business, or whether they actually, like me, work at the bank and, carry out the bank's duties and activities on a daily basis. So if our model is full of diverse people, we need to do what we can to support diverse people. And that's kind of the genesis of the efforts that you've mentioned before. Specifically, one thing that we've looked at a lot is investing in minority-owned, women-owned, and Black-owned banks. And that's something that we put a lot of time to answer the wealth generation question, because we realized that a lot of the problems that we have in America are due to lack of opportunities and access to capital. And so the bank has thought, well, what we can do is we can make sure that people looking to start businesses, that are women and minorities, et cetera, have access to capital and access to tools that they ordinarily haven't had access to historically. And, when you build a community in that way, when you help someone start a business, you don't think of it, but when you extrapolate that down the road, you're providing jobs to that community. you're providing parents that are able to enhance their children's education and enhance their chances of going to college and being able to afford it. And so, small businesses in America are really the genesis for a lot of the growth and wealth that we see in our country. And so if we can infuse capital in that way, we really believe that we can make a difference all across the country. When it comes to some of the other initiatives, African Americans and Latinos and others in the bank like myself have really pushed management and leadership to investigate doing more. And that's how you see the HBCU effort, came about. And so we're really focused on our customers and our customers' issues. And the issues right now are, women and minorities need the same standing in America as our Caucasian peers. And the bank understands that. And the bank is doing everything that it can to make that happen. And, it's a long road. This isn't a problem that got started overnight, and it's not going to be something that's going to be fixed overnight. But here at Wells Fargo, we're really committed to doing what we can to pushing the needle and moving the ball forward there. And so I'm really proud of that work that we're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That's awesome. Cristina, going over to you and Netflix, thinking about Netflix, who has a larger platform to really speak to the issues of our time than you all? And, when I think about Netflix right now, and not only are you developing and curating content for diverse communities, but at the same time, you guys have invested millions and millions of dollars to build economic opportunity for diverse communities. And, I think that's the uniqueness of Netflix, is you're doing your day-to-day stuff and creating great programming and content, while at the same time embedding money into the communities that you serve. So would love for you to talk about both of those and really the great work, share the great work you're doing in the racial equity space right now.
Thanks, Tommy. And hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here talking with all of you about this and just listening to everyone talk about the amazing initiatives they're doing. Tommy, you're right. Like we really are a company that I think we feel really proud of what we're able to do in the space. We tell stories and we try to bring really an inclusive lens to the world through our storytelling. And so we take really seriously the responsibility that we have to bring diverse stories to the world. So it is thinking about films, shows, and documentaries that really highlight the experiences of all sorts of people all over the world, whether it be through 13th or sex education or disclosure or When They See Us. Like these are shows and creators that we really have a platform to give the power of that storytelling to. So it's something that we really care very deeply about. And Tommy talked about my boss, Renee Myers. We joined the company 2 years ago because of that. This is a company that we really think can have transformative change. And that's how we think about our work in inclusion, is how can we leverage this incredible platform that we have to be able to bring more of a view of humanity into people's homes through the stories that we tell. So, we take really seriously, not just the people in front of the camera, but behind the camera. How do we create an incredibly diverse ecosystem of creators that can bring voice to these stories around the world? But we also think about it from an employee perspective, because we really see the inclusion work. Obviously, we think about it as being people who work in inclusion, but we really see it as, inclusion is about innovation. And if we have an incredibly empowered, diverse workforce, they're the ones who are going to come up with the amazing stories. And they're going to be the ones that come up with ideas that really transform social change. And Tommy referenced an initiative that we're involved in and that Nick was mentioning as well for Wells Fargo. A few months ago, one of our employees, Aaron Mitchell, who I work with, was doing these talks and came up with this idea, like we should put some of our money in Black banks. We're not a banking institution. We're an entertainment company and a technology company. And Aaron is in talent acquisition, and he's a director in that in that area. And he thought, maybe we should do this. So he went and talked to our CEO, and he went and talked to our chief financial officer. And as a result, we now have a commitment to invest 2% of our money in Black banks in the US. We started with a $35 million commitment. A number of other companies have done that as well. But to me, it's a powerful statement of not just of who we are as a company, but when you give people the ability to make transformative change, and you empower them to do it, they're going to come up with a brilliant idea. So it's an exciting time for that. But also mindful of, like, it's also hard. I mean, this is something that Erin did while we're all working from home in a pandemic, in the midst of a lot of unrest, as Tommy started out this with. So it's both. It's the recognition of optimism and the ability to make change, but recognizing too that we need to. And just going back to your initial question, and everyone said it, like, this is an imperative. We need to all do what we can do within whatever sphere we sit in to do the best we can do to elevate everyone that we can, whether it be here in the US or globally.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Cristina. This first question really was focused around what we're doing in our communities, but just as important to that, we're working for corporations that hire a number of employees as well. So, the second question it is really around what are you doing internally, whether it's pipeline programs, whether it's retention programs, whether it's support programs to help your diverse employees and making sure that they have the support that they need, particularly in this, just very unusual, unprecedented time. So, Russell, let's go back over to you for just a moment. Anything that you want to share in terms of what you guys are doing for your internal employees, and all of you who are particularly in the D&I space, you spend a lot of time, having to serve the community and the external piece, but you're also spending just as much time thinking about your folks at home as well. So any thoughts you want to share there would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. So I think for us right now, and especially in this moment in time, the events of the past several months have created a lot of internal and external conversation and interest, I think, around what companies, each of us represented here on this panel today and others are doing around diversity and inclusion. And I think a big piece of that is transparency around data, representation, things of that nature. And so for us, a big piece of it has been just the way in which we think about data transparency. Earlier this year in September, we released our first mid-year culture, diversity, and inclusion report that really looked at our numbers at the midpoint of our fiscal year. And in doing so, not only did we report on data that we've historically reported on, but we added more than 90 new first-time data disclosures to that. And so, a big piece of that, transparency is key, but then it's what do you do with that data? How do you use that data to drive decisions, to inform the direction in which you're going, to be more objective in your processes and to hold people accountable? We've put some processes in place to ensure that from an internal perspective, all new and replacement positions below the vice president level, at the vice president level and below, I should say, are posted internally first to help drive and catalyze internal movement up and through the pipeline. Implementation of diverse slates and candidate interview panels to ensure that we're not only getting a diverse pool of candidates, but that we are ensuring that the people who are making the hiring and selection process are diverse as well. We've developed with a partnership from an external curriculum development agency, an e-learning module for all hiring managers and recruiters on unconscious bias in the hiring and selection process that we rolled out back in August to really help our hiring managers understand what bias is, how it shows up in the selection process, and steps that we can take to mitigate that. And so, going back to the data, when you look and think about our workforce in the U.S., 46% of our total U.S. workforce is comprised of people of color at an aggregate level. When we say people of color, we're talking about Black and African American, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, and individuals of two or more races. When you look at that at a couple of different levels, that number's 36% for our management salaried folks in the U.S. And 25% for our corporate officers. We've got about 430 corporate officers at the VP level and above in the U.S. Again, 25% of those are people of color. Published in our mid-year report was 6.85% Black African American. That number is now up to 7.98%. About 35 of our corporate officers are Black or African American. And so, representation is important, but for us, more important is the movement, the in, up, and out, as we would say, the new hires, the promotions, and then the retention. And what really drives results in the numbers that we look at, more so than the representation, because the indicator of the health is the promotion rate. And so, it's exciting inside our business. Like I said, 36% of our salaried managers are people of color, but year to date, 45% of our total management promotions have been to people of color. Management associates comprise African American management associates comprise 11% of our workforce, but are 17% of our management promotions year to date. Hispanic Latinx associates comprise 10% of our management workforce, but have been 15% of our management promotions year to date. That's how you make those numbers go up, is that you look at the pipeline health, the new hires and the promotions, and how you grow the workforce that you have, but also bring new talent into the workforce.
That's great. Thanks, Russell. Cristina, and everyone will get a chance to dive into this question, but Cristina, back to you. One of the things that you touched on just a moment ago was the fact that you had so many of your employees working from home, and I think that is the case all over the world right now. So, in answering a similar question about what's going on internally, are there any programs or efforts that you guys have in place to provide support for your employees, your teammates who are working from home? Because that's one of the things we've seen within the Boeing company is it's harder to address issues when you're not seeing these people on a day-to-day basis. So anything you guys are doing in that front would be interesting to hear about as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tommy. I think there's a lot going on right now. This is a really hard way to connect, as everyone knows from having been in this space now for so long. And it's really taken down for a lot of folks any semblance of a wall between what's happening in the world and what's happening in the workplace. Like, we're literally at home in our communities, trying to navigate our work, but at the same time navigating all these things that we've been talking about. So on some level, it's speaking that truth with our employees. Like, we don't sit exactly in everyone's shoes, but we have to acknowledge that this is the reality we all are in, and that any boundaries that existed are gone. And so it really is, on every individual leader to make sure that they take the time to connect beyond just the let's have our meeting and do our work, but the check in on folks. But as a company as well, we've really been so amazingly impressed with our ERG leaders. We have now 15 ERGs, over 65 chapters globally. And wow, have these folks stepped up and really curated space for people to be in Zoom or and do breakouts and do all sorts of things to talk about where they are, even if it's just to hold space for conversation. So, we really support that work and partner very closely with them. My team supports those organizations. So it's been, again, really powerful to work with the employees. And then our inclusion team, like, we really partner with our leaders in each of our organizations and regions just to say, like, what can we do to help? What can we do to think about our employees? Because this isn't for lots of folks ending anytime soon. And just to recognize, like, yeah, sometimes a kid's going to run into the frame, and that's okay. And what do we need to do to consistently understand where people are? So it's both the personal, but also just enabling our employees to be there for each other and creating those spaces.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Brandon, going over to you. I mean, we talked about the fact that NASCAR has all of these programs in place internally to help support pipeline and grow not only the fan base, but and grow diverse leadership within the industry. But you are the VP, the first VP that's been, hired to develop a strategy for NASCAR. Can you talk about that? You're helping to create the long-term vision for internal and external, action in the D&I space. So you want to share a little bit about what's in your head right now? What are you having to do? What's on your mind in terms of the work that you have now and ahead of you in the future?
Certainly, Tommy. We've kind of broken this thing down into 3 buckets. And so for us, since June, we've really taken the balance of this year to focus on exactly what Cristina mentioned, which was our internal workings, right? We understand that, yes, we need to, which I'll touch on in a second. I won't be here long if we can't start to shift the culture of the industry and the sport, right? But what we had to do was start with our own culture and our own, what is NASCAR as an employee or as an employer, and as a company, what are we doing there? And so taking a lot of time to focus on that. We've been able to launch employee resource groups for the first time. We've created an executive ally council that actually our president, Steve Phelps, put into place at the end of last year. But then over the course of this year, just with all the things that were going on, both be it from the pandemic or the social injustice, and even some things that we've had to navigate within our own industry in terms of some things, we created an employee diversity council. And so really that employee diversity council, it predated the ERGs, but what it was designed to do was to be able to have direct touch points from people across the industry, or across our company, in several different disciplines, and a mixture of diverse employees and allies, people who identify differently, different religions, et cetera, to really make sure that everyone had a touch point and an opportunity to share just experiences and challenges and triumphs as well with our executive leadership team. And so we focused on those pieces internally. Obviously, hiring is a huge part of that. We've got work to do in that area, and we know and understand that. It's not something that we shy away from. We're probably a lot more diverse than what people think, but we're not where we want or need to be. And so that's going to be a huge focus for us in 21 and beyond. But then there's as I mentioned, the industry component, and that's really getting our competitor base and the folks in and around the racetrack every week to start to affect culture and shift it that way. So we've already had a group of drivers that have gone through sensitivity and unconscious bias training with Rise, who is certainly as far as sports, but really probably across all business, a best in class organization. So we've had a group of our drivers, some of our most notable drivers, participate in that, and we'll continue to do that throughout the course of the off season as we look to wrap up the season here in a couple of weeks. And then the last part of that for us is external facing, and that's the fun part when hopefully all this COVID stuff is over and behind us, when we can actually start having fans back at the racetrack in earnest. It's just exposing people to the sport and going to HBCU campuses and doing those types of things to make sure that people understand the opportunities that lie within NASCAR as an industry. And I think, yes, so we certainly want to be at the forefront of people's minds when it comes to sports and entertainment, when you sit down in front of your TV on Sunday. But I think even more important, and this kind of, again, to a point that Nick mentioned, is that we've got to make sure that people understand what the job opportunities are and the career opportunities that lie, and how deep that goes and how wide that is spread out, because it's not just working at NASCAR proper. There's agencies, there's teams, there's drivers who have personal representation. We have to feed well over 200 employees at the racetrack, every week, 3 times a day when we're at the racetrack. And so there's opportunities for culinary arts, there's opportunities for hospitality, obviously lawyers. I could go on for days, as you could tell, but the point is that we've got to make sure that we're exposing minority groups and those who differently identify to all of those opportunities that lie within the sport. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken, is really breaking it down into 3 buckets. And there's a lot there, and there's a lot of sub buckets within those, but that's the easiest way we could kind of, put together a battle strategy and make it all make sense.
Yeah, that's great. And Brandon, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that I just was thinking right now as you were talking. So it's completely off the cuff, and I apologize. Obviously, Michael Jordan just became one of your owners, and I'm really interested to get your thoughts on what you think he does for the sport internally with your employee culture, but for the fan base as well.
Now, look, goes without saying, and it's probably an understatement, that Michael Jordan is a global icon, not just in sports, but just period, right? And so to have him come join the sport, and I think there's tentacles to this as well. So him joining the sport is newsworthy enough, but I think then when you look at the fact that he has selected Bubba Wallace as his driver, that goes even further into the point of what we're trying to accomplish in terms of really making sure that Bubba has the opportunity to show his talent. We know that he has a lot of talent. He's been in the Cup Series now for a few years, but when he was in the Truck Series and coming up, he actually led the series in wins. And so we know that when he's in equipment that can perform, he can put the car in victory lane. And so that's significant. But for me, and this is, probably I'm biased here, but the reason that Michael Jordan said that he wanted to come into the sport was that he saw the shift in what we were doing and where the sport was going and what the future looked like. And so that for me, and for really our entire team, as far as our D&I staff, is a pride point for us. And we're excited that the things that we're trying to stand up and the efforts that we're putting forth are making waves, and that they're impacting people even as popular, right, and as busy as Michael Jordan. So for him to take note of that really meant a lot to us, and we're excited about what that'll mean. Actually, and just as long as we're talking about folks that's kind of becoming more involved, Emmett Smith, with a company that he just launched, a social media company that he has, I actually just sponsored Jesse Iwuji, who is another Black driver that we have on the circuit in the Xfinity Series in Texas. If we can ever get out of there, we're still there trying to race the Cup Series today. It's raining, but so we're starting to pull in folks from a lot of different aspects and starting to get a lot of looks from for people who haven't considered it as a business opportunity, but certainly, from partnership and even from a fan standpoint. So we're really excited about what the future holds.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Nick, let me go back over to you for a moment. Early on, we were talking about Wells Fargo's, commitment to hiring from within HBCUs and HBCU engagement. Obviously, as a HBCU alum, this is near and dear to you. But will you talk a little more about those efforts, and particularly how building that pipeline through HBCUs is going to be really important to your company going forward?
No, it's integral. And, there's the myth, that there are no minorities in finance, and it's a myth that persists, and we're aware of that, and we're working towards changing that narrative. And a lot of that starts, when you're a freshman at Morehouse, or you're a freshman at Clark, or you're a freshman at Spelman or Howard or Xavier, or you name a HBCU, and a recruiter from Wells Fargo is there, letting you know about the opportunities of the bank, letting you know what courses you should try to take, making sure that there are mentors available for you and people that you can talk to that look like you, that can tell you about life as a banker, not just at Wells Fargo, but whether you're going to Bank of America or Goldman Sachs, to know that this is a career path that you can choose. And it's working with the career service departments of the various HBCUs and other colleges. And I really have to give a nod to our HR staff and our HR team and our diversity inclusion leaders, because they are piloting that effort. And, unfortunately with COVID, we can't actually be on the ground, talking to college students, and a lot of colleges are shut down. But what we can do virtually, we're having seminars and we're having symposiums to give younger students an ability to talk to bankers and learn about careers in finance. And hopefully, kind of like Brandon said, we can develop that pipeline. And so that as people matriculate through college and they decide, they want to come work at Wells, or they decide they want to grab their MBA, or they want to do financial law like I do, they'll have opportunities and they'll know how to get there. And maybe they've had internships, at Wells Fargo, because we're doing a lot of those as well all across the country for people looking to get in finance and want to get that experience. And so definitely check our website out. If you have folks that are interested in finance, or contact me afterwards. I'd love to connect you to those people, because we're looking for good folks that really want to get into finance. And it shouldn't matter your religion, your sex, the color of your skin. finance is for everyone, and Wells Fargo, we really believe that careers here are for everyone as well.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Cristina, I'm going to go back over to you for just a moment. Russell talked a little bit about, diversity, the e-learning programs that they were doing, trainings for managers and employees, and really centered around implicit bias and unconscious bias and other issues. Are y'all working on those areas and doing anything on that front too? Is the first part of the question. And then, since we're talking about HBCUs, I know you guys have done some work in HBCUs and creating virtual programs for students as well. If you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, on that point, we just launched a new program with an HBCU to do a virtual boot camp for folks who want to enter the tech industry, because like finance, like Nicholas was talking about finance, lots of folks don't think that there are Black people and brown people who are engineers and in the tech industry. And so we need to get folks who are in college knowing that this is a great area to be in, and not just to tell them that, but to give them the tools to do it. So we partnered with a company called 2U to develop a 16-week curriculum that we just launched virtually with over 100 students. That the curriculum was created by our engineers and by our data science engineers and all sorts of folks. So it's a really exciting program, and they're going to mentor students through that. And we really hope it doesn't just help Netflix, frankly, but it helps our industry in the tech side, which is not very diverse. And I wanted to just commend Brandon and others for saying, we all have work to do. So this is one way that we're trying to do that. When Russell was talking about training, and I think Brandon mentioned it as well, we think a lot about training. We talk about things like privilege at Netflix. We talk about things like bias. But one thing we've also noted is that it's not just about the learning of it, it's the doing. And so we really think a lot about transforming those learnings into the opportunity to apply. And so we think about it a lot, because I wish there were magical bias training that we could just all offer and just solve it. I think everyone on this call would do that in a heartbeat. What we do know is people need to understand, for example, what unconscious bias is, but they also need to know what it means to interrupt it. And that takes courage, and it takes practice, and it takes an acceptance that you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So we talk about that a lot. This is not a perfection exercise. We really have to be willing to step into our discomfort in order to create equity for people, and to really think about, what is my position and what can I do better? So formal learning is a really important part, but that application of learning to the day-to-day work that we do is vital.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Russell, you talked a little bit about, disclosing data and holding yourselves accountable, but also letting the public hold you accountable in the same regards. There is this notion of self-assessment. How do we assess the work that we're doing and make sure that we're actually measuring results to show that we're having an impact? Can you talk a little more about what you guys are doing at Walmart to, in addition to just disclosing information, to make sure that you hold yourselves accountable to the work that you're doing in the D&I space?
Yeah, Tommy, I mentioned accountability a little bit earlier, and I think that the data kind of goes hand in hand with that. A few years ago, our CEO was having a meeting with our Chief Diversity Officer and other senior leaders that comprise our President's Inclusion Council, and they were talking about this very issue. And one of the comments was made by a senior leader in one of our operating segments that it's really hard to put an action plan together when you don't know your data and you don't see your data. And up until that point, we had been very close hold on our D&I data. It was seen by people in our office at an aggregate level, seen by our CEO and some other senior leaders, and that was about it. And so, the challenge from Doug McMillan, our CEO, was find a way to be able to share the data in the right way. And so, we partnered very closely, with our colleagues in legal, who helped us frame up a training for all of our officers to understand, when you have this data, what is appropriate to do with it and what's not appropriate to do with it. And so we've provided access to a dashboard for all of our vice president level leaders and above to be able to see the representation of women and people of color within their vertical organization, as well as the movement, the new hires, the promotion, and the turnover. And in doing so, we've really put our leaders in a position to be able to create customized plans, whether that's working with their talent acquisition partners, for instance, like we've talked about, in doing recruiting at HBCUs, or working with organizations like Thurgood Marshall College Fund, or National Association of Black Accountants, or National Black MBA, for instance, in the finance space, Afrotech from from an IT perspective, to really create those customized acquisition plans, but also looking at how are we putting in place development programs, ensuring that people of color and women are getting those development opportunities, are being identified for high potential development opportunities, stretch opportunities, expat assignments, things of that nature, really kind of looking end to end at our talent. As an example, we have a session tomorrow with our Walmart U.S. business unit, where they're going to be looking and understanding how bias shows up in the performance and evaluation process, and then looking across the board at talent as it comes to annual calibration. So it really starts with the conversation. It starts with providing the data and context on the data, and then holding leaders to the expectations that have been set around leading inclusively. Ultimately, we all know that the only right answer is to hire the best, most qualified individual for the role. Our job is to ensure that there's more diversity in that pool, and that there's a more diverse population of individuals who are making that hiring and selection decision. We believe that if we hold people accountable to the processes, then we will see the results on the back end as it relates to increases in progress around representation and upward trajectory in some of those movements. But it really starts with what are the expectations, what are the policies and practices that are in place, and how do we ensure that leaders are equipped to be able to lead on those and lean on their HR business partners to be able to do so.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Russell. Brandon, let me go to you for a moment, and then we're going to get to some of the questions that our participants had. And this is similar to Russell's, I guess, in some regards, but there's a notion out there that all of our companies are doing this D&I work because we're in a moment of time where it's expected, or that we're pandering to some constituency. How do we make sure that we sustain the impact, that people see that the work that we're doing is genuine, that we're really making a difference, that we're in this for the long haul, and we're not just doing this in response to the recent tragedies that our country has experienced?
Well, I think that in a future state, Tommy, the best thing we can do is just continue to do it and continue to make strides, right? And the only way any of us who are sitting here, or any of the companies who have involved, who have decided to take on this journey, the proof is going to be in the pudding, so to speak, right? It's going to be in putting our actions where our words are. But I think one of the things that I found really helpful and beneficial for us as we broach these topics of conversation is really pointing people back to the numbers, right? And that we know that, and we understand that, by 2045, we've all probably heard it too many times now, this is going to be a majority minority country. We know that even sooner, I think in like 2025, the next generation that's coming up, which is already by definition the most diverse that we've seen in the country, are going to make up I think like 70 or 75% of our workforce. And so these issues that we're looking to rectify aren't going to go away. I think we've seen over 2020 that this next generation of Gen Z and millennials, they're not having it, so to speak, right? It's just not going to continue to be able to go on this way. And if any of our companies are going to be successful into the future, and we want to still be around in 2045 and still be viable businesses, we're going to have to address these issues, and we're going to have to listen, and we're going to have to evolve our practices from what they were. And I think this is just the beginning. And I can tell you that from our standpoint, when we look back over the course of the last 20 or so, 25 years, it doesn't seem that far away when we start to recall sort of some of the things that we've taken in innovations in terms of safety, and some of the things that we've done with our races, and some of the things that we've done with our facilities. And one of the conversations that we've had internally, and even with some of our industry partners and stakeholders, is imagine where we would be today in 2020 had the leaders before us decided, it's not important, it doesn't matter what's going to happen 25 years from now. We wouldn't be around. And so I think that just sort of bearing that in mind with everything that we do will help aid and I guess drive home the point that this can't be an initiative, this can't be a moment anymore. If companies are going to continue to be viable and continue to make strides in this space, we're going to have to evolve and adapt the way that we're doing business. And this is the new way of doing business. And I think we'll all benefit from that. The world will be a better place, and by default, in the same way that some of these issues that we're dealing with are societal now. As society continues to shift, businesses will be better because society will be better.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I mean, very nicely said. All right, so I have a couple minutes to ask some questions from our registrants, and this one will be to you, Nick, and then to Cristina. You're obviously on a panel where participants are young lawyers around the country, and one of the first questions that we got from participants was around what is the role of lawyers in the state of America right now? What is our role and responsibility in helping to address some of these issues? So I'll go to you, Nick, first, and then over to Cristina if you want to add to it as well from a lawyer perspective.
No, thank you. It's really the role it's always been. If you look throughout history, lawyers have been leaders. A lot of the people that we celebrate that have led this country as president have been lawyers all throughout history. Congressmen, congresswomen throughout history have been lawyers, leaders, speakers, clergymen, clergywomen, lawyers. And so it's something about the Juris Doctorate that helps you advocate and become zealous advocates, not just for clients, but also social issues. And so I'll posit that we're still doing the same thing today. At the bank, I try to lead, not only when I'm doing transactions, mergers and deals, but I'm also leading in diversity and inclusion spaces, leading on equity, leading on the things that hopefully make this country a better place for all of us and our future children to live in. And so I advocate that everyone on the call listening that's a lawyer, just don't forget the power that you have to affect change, the power that your position that you hold as a lawyer and people's willingness to listen to you, to listen to what you have to say, and maybe even take that to the next step of putting thoughts to action. As a lawyer, you have that power, and you've always had that power, and you always will have that power. So a lot of it's just on, do you want to use that power to affect change and be an agent for good?
It's hard to follow that up. It's kind of perfect because it is like this is, you all have the key to the courthouse, and this is, you are the gatekeepers to the courthouse, and it's a tremendous responsibility, but also an opportunity to really do transformative change in the world. And so, Nick was right on, like the lawyers have led in this area. They continue to lead, whether it be in the courthouse, whether it be in passing laws, but also just because you know how systems work and you have a voice and you have that ability to speak, is that it's an opportunity and a responsibility. So I think Nick said it right on. Just lean into your discomfort, step forward, keep at it, whether it be internally at your companies or your law firms or externally in the world. It's a tremendous opportunity for all of us, I think.
Good. All right, I got one more question for you, and any of you can answer this. Someone asked a question around worthy causes, so specific organizations that your companies are supporting. One of the things that we've seen even in our company is this this opportunity for us to support social justice related organizations. So organizations that are either helping people who have been wrongfully incarcerated or to provide legal representation for people. Any of your companies doing work in this space or providing support for organizations that are really helping people in the legal space? Anyone can jump in here if any specific thoughts come to mind.
Yeah, this is Russell. I'll jump in there. I think for us, I think there's the macro total company piece, and then what you position and empower your associates, your employees to be able to do through personal giving as well. So, earlier this year in June, we announced a $100 million 5-year commitment to establish a center for racial equity within our Walmart Foundation to really focus on systems change approach to racial equity around criminal justice, finance, education, and healthcare. And so we're in the early stages of kind of building out that organization, identifying potential grants that we can fund, this fiscal year and then beyond through that piece. But then there's also the component of, what are the organizations that you support from a corporate perspective? American Bar Association, right here, we support the Hispanic Bar Association and many others, from a legal and compliance perspective to help develop and identify talent and equity within the legal profession. But then there's the piece around opportunities for your employees or your associates. We've historically had direct associate giving out of payroll deductions to be able to contribute to scholarship funds, predominantly things like Native American Scholarship Fund, Thurgood Marshall, United Negro College Fund, things of that nature. Earlier this year, we actually retooled that program completely and made it to the point where our associates can provide directed payroll contributions to any qualified 501c3 that they see fit. And we kick-started that off with an initial 2-for-1 match and actually announced early on, and kind of keeping with the spirit of the legal and justice profession, a $2 million matching commitment early on to the Equal and Justice Initiative, Brian Stevenson's organization, which I think many people are really familiar with, from his book and the film Just Mercy. So you're really providing individuals choice to be able to give to organizations that they're passionate about around equity or justice or diversity and inclusion from an employee level, but then also setting up those philanthropic levers that help you really activate from a business-enabled philanthropy. What are the places where you're able to push and pull? Nick talked about, obviously, from a financial sector perspective with Wells Fargo. We, from a Walmart perspective, we're obviously able to lean in the areas around employment and healthcare, because those are spaces that we play. So kind of finding those places where your business overlaps with society helps you really maximize the impact that you can have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Russell. And guys, I mean, we're out of time. I hate that. I feel like we could spend a lot more time talking about these important issues, but the four of you can't thank you enough for your time today, your leadership, all the work that you're doing, not only for your companies, but for the communities all over the country as well. So just one little closing thought for all of you who are listening in, participating in this program. These are companies who are doing it right, who are committed to these issues, who are making a difference. So I encourage you to go open a Wells Fargo account, go to a NASCAR race, go shop at Walmart today, and watch some Netflix tonight. So thank you all so much for the four of you, Nick, Cristina, Brandon, Russell, for your time today. For the YLD groups that helped put this together, our diversity and inclusion team and our business law committee, Tracy, Kemp on staff for helping make this happen. So thank you all so much for being with us. Look forward to reconnecting with you all in the future. Take care.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, everyone. Good job, Tommy.
Thanks a lot.